but I've just... Okay, so Toni, just while people are coming in, I had a little pre-question for you.
Okay, a pre-question question.
Yes, and it relates to, we often hear about authors who talk about their projects that never were, and they get put in the bottom drawer. I was wondering if you had a novel that you had ever consigned to the bottom drawer, and how far into it were you when
I've got two, not just one, Jen. I've got two bottom drawer novels, and I can't tell. It's kind of, for me, it's the whole process is like making a strange kind of cake. So I mix everything together, but I can't tell if it works till it comes out of the oven. So I didn't abandon any of those projects until I was right the way through, and then I looked back at them and went, oh my God, this is a disaster. So neither of them worked, which is kind of, one of the risks of my process. So yeah, we can talk about the process, but it's not without its hazards.
Yeah, so you actually finished two and just kind of went, that's not a cake I want to eat.
That is, you look back at it and you go, what was I thinking?
Yeah,
I needed more alcohol, less alcohol. Something is just not working in this formula. So yes, there's two. But, I'm also a really great recycler. So everything goes in the recycling kind of pile, and I nip, even little paragraphs or little anecdotes or just lines. So I do kind of cannibalize them.
I was wondering that if you sort of salvaged them, went digging through the bottom drawer to think, oh, that character that was in that bad cake, I want to save them and put them into this new project.
Even little lines, like descriptions of things, like descriptions is my worst thing. So sometimes I'll go, actually, in that really terrible manuscript, didn't I have that really good description of like a tree? So I just snip it out, stick it in. Recycling, it's like my fourth recycling bit. It's excellent.
Look, very sustainable writing practices.
That's right.
I'm seeing we're getting lots of people in. The Whitsundays, Ballarat, Melbourne. I'm from Melbourne. Hello, Melbourne.
And I'm in West End in Brisbane, so hello from there.
And did you say you're not going to the Whitsundays tomorrow? It's the Gold Coast, isn't it?
It's Sunshine Coast.
Oh, Sunshine Coast.
Yep.
Is Sunshine Coast the Whitsundays?
No, it's just a bit north of Brisbane, maybe a couple of hours.
Sorry, Queensland. My Queensland geography is a little bit rusty. It looks like we've got quite a few people in today, so perhaps it's time to say welcome. Welcome to Books and Bubbles. My name's Genevieve Gannon. I'm a feature writer at the Australian Women's Weekly. I'm so thrilled to be here with Toni Jordan, award-winning author of 6 novels, and we're here tonight to discuss her latest, Dinner with the Schnabels. Hi, Toni.
Jen. Hello, Jen. Thank you so much. But I have to warn you, I've got no bubbles. I'm breaking the sacred Books and Bubbles covenant. I have a Negroni with Queensland finger limes in it. So I hope that's still okay. I hope you're not going to like push the button to eject me or anything.
I think that's perfectly fine. It sounds like an amazing experiment. Finger limes and Negronis.
It might not be repeated, but it's all right just for one, I think.
Very good. So for those of you who are not completely familiar with Toni's history, her first book, Edition, was longlisted for the Miles Franklin Award and published in, Toni, was it 16 countries?
Yeah, I think
I've got 16
18 countries, maybe 18 countries, yeah.
What was the most unexpected country that Edition was published in?
I've got the Russian version at home. Wow. I've got the Taiwanese, and actually a number of my books are in Taiwanese. So yeah, it's amazing when they come in the mail, and I speak none of these languages. So I have no idea what it says on the inside, but the outside looks fantastic.
You just have to trust that it's the same story that you wrote. It must feel pretty incredible to see somebody who's translated your entire thing into a completely different language.
It's really just one of the great joys of my life because it's not the same relationship as your publisher here, and they just come, and it's a completely different take on it. And you can tell that they have a completely different kind of vision for what that story is. So it's a joy.
Yeah. So after Addiction, you followed up with All Girl and then the historical novel 9 Days, which won the Best Fiction Prize at the Indie Awards. Congratulations. Our Tiny Useless Hearts, The Fragments, and now this very colourful beauty here. So Toni Jordan has told us that Dinner with the Schnabels is her most deliberate novel to date, and you can purchase it through our event partner QBD Books. I believe they still have some signed copies, so if you're getting quick, you'll get one that's been hand signed by Toni. And there's a link in our chat where you can pick up of Dinner with the Schnabels. I loved Dinner with the Schnabels. I have a lot of questions for Toni, but I wanted to remind everyone that this is an opportunity for you to ask your questions. So when, as you're sitting there listening to us have a conversation, just pop your little question in the Q&A, all of your burning queries, and Toni will answer them for you. But for now, I hope that you have some bubbles and can sit back and enjoy the conversation with the wonderful Toni Jordan. So Toni, the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about, I heard that Dinner with the Schnabels was a lockdown project, and I was hoping you could tell me what that process was like, writing this in lockdown. You wrote it incredibly quickly. Was it faster than usual? Was it bubbles fueled? Was it Negroni fueled? Talk us through the creation of the Schnabels.
Well, I'm really one of the few people, Jen, unaffected by a lockdown, because I sit at home by myself anyway, in my pajamas, just typing away. So, I'm quite used to being by myself. So it wasn't really the disruption that it was for a lot of other people. But I kind of, because I was starting this novel at the beginning of 2020, like my first day of work on this novel was, I can remember distinctly, 1st of April 2020. And I kind of thought, actually, I have an opportunity here to do something a little bit different. So I went back, and this sounds so nerdy, and I know I'm such a science nerd, but I had a bit of a research of the Spanish flu epidemic that was 1917. And that was like 3 years. And I thought, so, we're a bit smarter now. I thought to myself, turns out we're not. But at the time, I thought that we probably were. And if I timed this right and was careful about it, I could write a novel and release it as we were coming out, and have that coming out feeling captured between the pages. So, this is why I think it is my most deliberate novel, because I've never actually, I never plan any novels, but I actually had a idea of when it would be released now and what that would feel like.
And with the Schnabels already rattling around in your head before COVID arrived and you sat down to write this lockdown novel, or was it something that once you sat down, you began to think about, what's the story I want to tell? Who are the characters I want to include?
Yeah, both of those options sound so much better than how I actually do it. How I actually do it is I just start with a scene. So I started with a guy and his wife at the railway station to spy on his wife's half-sister. And then as each scene progresses, each new person pops in. So I am really a full-on, we say in creative writing circles, you're a planner or a pantser. So planner is someone who logically, as you have suggested, works out who they need to tell this story and makes some kind of plan of how the story is going to go. And you have people like me, pantsers, who do things by the seat of their pants. So I sit down at the beginning of the story and I just every day see what happens that day and then see what happens the next day, and the story just grows from there. And I just rope people in as I realize I need them.
It sounds like a more fun way of doing it. Sort of like you're discovering the story as you're going.
It is. It's so fun. And that's why it's sometimes people say, oh, it's really, I speak to a lot of novelists who say, it's hard, I get writer's block. And I'm like, but don't you want to find out what happens? And they look at me like, I know what happens. Like, I never know what happens. It's always a surprise to me. So I think that is what keeps me at the desk. So
yeah. So for those who haven't read Dinner with the Schnabels yet, the book focuses on Simon Larson, an architect who is devoted to his dazzling wife Tansy and two young children. But things haven't been working out well for Simon lately. We have eccentric in-laws, a complicated modern family, an unexpected house guest. And amidst all of this, he's coming to terms with a new, vastly altered post-COVID life. Toni, what was the kernel that started this story? I know we've sort of talked about your process, but when you sit down to write the scene, what was the first scene that you wrote?
The first scene I wrote, I can only do it, from the beginning. I start at the beginning. So the first scene was the scene at the train station, which is kind of the first scene in the proper part of the book. And then I move forward from there. But I always knew, this is why this story is a little bit different for me, that I wanted to capture a feeling of kind of joy, because throughout 2020, it was really, I watched too much television. Like, let's face it, we kind of all watched too much television. And I found myself drawn to those kind of shows, like the Schitt's Creek and the Ted Lassos and those kind of, something that was warm-hearted with people who are, often doing the wrong things, but for the right reasons, and just couldn't kind of couldn't get it together with the people that they loved, like couldn't express themselves to the people that they loved. And I had a deliberate idea I was going to write something that was, this sounds so terrible and like it should be on Disney, so please, but heartwarming. I was trying to find a heartwarming, which is harder than you might think. Because I feel like at the moment we're just overwhelmed with cynicism and a lot of difficulties. So I really was striving for a feeling more than a story, I guess.
Right. I think, everyone was just craving that feeling during those bleaker times of lockdown, and particularly Melbourne. I imagine that I can picture you just thinking, God, I just need something really Disney-esque.
Yeah, that's right.
Brighten things up. So Simon is having a little bit of a crisis. I'm not sure if it's a midlife crisis, but it's definitely some sort of crisis. And I'm interested in your inspiration for that, because I've heard you talk about your own midlife crisis before. You described having a package of midlife crisis events, one of which was your incredible tattoo.
I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it on the camera? This is photograph 51. So it's the first X-ray sort of diffraction pattern of DNA ever taken back in 1952 by Rosalind Franklin and her team of scientists. And it's a fascinating story about the intersection of feminism and science, and this amazing breakthrough that's changed so much about our world. So yeah, I really, I got the tattoo, and it was, it's kind of, it is a midlife crisis. Yes, definitely.
And did you draw on your own experience to help flesh out Simon's crisis?
Well, I think we've all been in that position where really my crisis, where I felt more like Simon, was a bit earlier. I think I was unemployed when I was about 23. This sounds so stupid now. Even saying the word sounds stupid, but I was unemployed for probably 5 months, and I legit thought, this is it. My life is over. I will never get a job. I will never, it's ridiculous. But sometimes the hope kind of goes out of you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get moving again.
I think particularly when you're that age as well, one thing goes wrong, it's very early. It's very easy to kind of think it's over. I'm going to have to live in a box.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it sounds stupid now, but we're very much as a society wedded to this idea of status and success and get things moving, and everyone around you seems to be doing better than you are all the time, and of course it's all an illusion. Everyone has the same fears and the same troubles inside, but on the outside they look kind of glossier than you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that's more true now than ever before with social media, but I'm going to come to social media later. Before we get to social media, I want to ask one more question about tattoos in your family. I understand there's a tradition of tattoos in the Jordan women?
We do. So my mum got her first tattoo when she was older than I am now, to commemorate the first of the Brisbane Lions three-peat against when the Brisbane Lions won the grand final. I brought her down to Melbourne and I got her a ticket to the grand final, and then when I went to pick her up after the game, I couldn't find her. She wasn't at the train station. I rang her, and she's never been to Melbourne before. She's in her 60s, very she's not a traveller, and I said, "Where are you?" And she said, "I'm in Chapel Street getting a tattoo." So she got herself a lion, a nice roan lion sleeve. So yeah, we are. I'm walking in my mother's footsteps.
That's incredible. I love that. Particularly as a Melburnian, I understand the need to get your team colours put on your arm. So the next question I have, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to turn to the book to help me with this question.
Oh.
And I want to look at the moment when Simon first sees his wife, Tansy, and he experiences a thunderbolt moment of love at first sight. And I just, if you don't mind, I thought I'd share a passage with our readers, because I actually underlined it when I was reading it before, sort of not intending to read it tonight, but just thinking what a great passage. So here we go. First, let's cover. First, Simon felt a jolt, then a shiver spread over his skin. His heart almost jumped from his chest. He felt, and this was such a cliche he could hardly believe it, as though he'd been struck by lightning. Like every self-respecting bloke, he'd never believed in love at first sight. Yet here it was. Unlikely as it might seem, all those romantic poets and 60s balladeers had been right all along. Simon felt his gut drop away into a yawning cavern, as though he'd eaten nothing since Tuesday, and stomach acid was burning its way through his intestines. Then his head began to boil, as though someone was using his scalp as a Weber. Fantastic description there. The question I have, does Toni Jordan believe in love at first sight?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to tell you, I fell in love with my husband at first sight. I met him at a party, and it's nearly 30th of April will be 28 years ago. And he took my hand at the party and he said, "How are you going?" And I was like, right, well, that's the rest of my life sorted. Don't have to do anything, don't have to worry about anything else. So yeah, absolutely. I've fallen in love at first sight, definitely.
And it was a happily ever after?
So far, if he keeps, he's got to just keep, keep pulling his socks up.
I had one more question, and I sort of alluded to this before with the comment about social media. Simon encounters several young people in his journey and who challenge his worldview. Vows can be extremely directional is a classic line. And I'm dying to try a sriracha donut. When I think about from a writing perspective, he already has so many colourful characters in his life, but the Gen Z characters that you've created are really alive and really funny. I was wondering, what role did you want them to play in the story, and how did you research them? Because they feel so hilariously bang on.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thanks, Jen. I don't have any children myself, and my nieces and nephew live up here in Queensland and I live in Melbourne, so I don't see them as much as I should. But one of my books, 9 Days, the historical novel, is on the VC English list, so I do have the opportunity to go into schools and talk to year 12 students about books. And they are just phenomenal. They're just phenomenal. They're so much more smarter than I was at that age. They're so much more engaged. Some of the things they come out with, and this is something I really tried to capture, it sounds kooky, right? To us, it sounds kooky, but it's because they're trying to make moral and ethical choices in a world that's much more complex than it was for us. So everything that they're doing, is because they're trying to do it better. They're trying to find a better way to do it. And I'm just completely in awe of them. And I hope that it comes across that Simon is a little bit intimidated, a little bit gobsmacked, but he's also kind of admiring of their gusto and their smarts and the way they're so brave about how they take things on.
It's funny that you say that. I'm just going to go on a little tangent here, if that's okay, but I don't know if anyone saw this today. It was an example of something that I think embodies that so much. A model had been caught kissing Harry Styles at Coachella, I think, and everyone was asking her, were you kissing Harry Styles? Were you kissing Harry Styles? And she sort of said, well, that's a very good question. A better question is, what are we doing about climate change? Sort of completely turned it into this discussion about an issue she really cared about. And I just thought that was very, very cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like, I would have gone to pieces, like kissing Harry Styles, I would have gone to pieces. And then the question I would have melted down as well. But I just have to pause for 1 second because I've got earring interference. They're telling me on the chat. So I just have to take out my, can you see these gorgeous,
fantastic,
spangly hearts, but they're knocking against my thing.
Okay, we'll just pause.
So, okay, pause for earring removal services. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Now that the earrings have been removed, perhaps we can go to some audience questions. This is from Charlene. Charlene wants to know, hi, Toni, how did you come up with the name Schnabel? It's such a wonderful name.
Isn't it a wonderful name? Thank you, Charlene. I feel very embarrassed that I hadn't actually met a Schnabel, but I just like that schn sound. And like, you know, the best like sounding dog is what is it? It's a schnauzer, right? And schnauzers and schnitzels. And I was in a bookstore in Melbourne's eastern suburbs last week, and someone told me about an episode of The Big Bang Theory, which I confess I don't really watch, where Penny got drank on schnapps so she could just say schnapps because of the sound, right? So I picked it because I really just love the sound of it. And then people have since told me it should be Schnabel, but I don't. Considering I invented them, I think I can overrule the actual correct thing and call it Schnabel. I've never met one. If there's any Schnabels/Schnabels out there, I'm sorry to have stolen your name, but it's so awesome.
That's the cool thing about fiction, isn't it? You can just completely create anything you want. I have another question here. At what stage did you decide to add the prologue, which is such a great?
That is definitely a question being asked by a writer. I bet you any money. Well, that was halfway through. So what happened was I started at the beginning and I got halfway through, and I started at the beginning and I wrote the first chapter, the railway station chapter, and I typically and my publisher doesn't see it till it's finished, but I often will send her like one chapter just for the voice and like the main character and how it sounds. And so I sent her like maybe 3,000 words. That's just at the very beginning. And she was like, oh, we like the voice and the character's great. Everybody seems to be great, but it's very slow beginning. And I don't really overly care about these people at the very start. So you know, that's not super what you want to hear. You know, when you send the beginning to the publisher, you want the publisher to go, it's awesome, right? So I kind of, okay. So I just had to park it in the back of my brain. And then I got halfway through, and then I suddenly thought, oh, I know what I need to put in so that the reader is on board earlier.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with that because I love this idea. You know, I've done it in a couple of my books now. So I love this idea that the reader knows more than the characters do. And to me, that is really, like, I like it as a reader, like I like books like that, and I like doing it myself. So if I can, and I've done this a couple of times through the story where Simon is describing something honestly or explaining something that he truly thinks is what's going on. But I'm hoping I've included enough so the reader is going, Simon, mate, it's not that. Don't do that. You know, like, it's obvious that he's getting it wrong, even though he's acting with the best intentions. So I was 50% through, and then I went back and put the prologue on.
Yeah, it kind of gives us a little hint of what's to come. So we have a question from Patrick. Patrick asks, was there ever a time where you faltered in your writing? It's been such an uncertain time for everyone, which is an excellent question.
Yeah. I think I'm really lucky because I think part of it is, Patrick, that I don't plan. So I genuinely, if I'm going to find out what happens in the end of the story, I've just got to sit down and write it. There's no other way to figure it out. And also I really identify with the idea of writing as a craft more than as an art. I've never really seen myself as a, artist sitting in a garret waiting for, the muse to descend. I strongly identify with these long traditions of craftspeople who sit down every day and make something with their hands, and that might be, woven something or knitted something or something from pottery or, silverwork or whatever it is, but they make, their job is to make something useful and as beautiful as they can, and to put all their energy into it, and then go home and sit on the couch and watch Bridgerton. Like I kind of have it. This is my job. My job is to put as much of my craft in as possible, in the hope that someone likes it, and then sort of switch off of it. And I'm also really conscious of what an incredible privilege it is to write fiction full time. Like so many people would, who are better writers than me, don't get that opportunity. So I really, I'm very conscious of how lucky I am as well.
I have another question that's kind of similar. Now, this person I think is kind of being around for some trade secrets. This is from Kate. Kate says there are so many genuinely laugh out loud, read out and annoy your spouse with moments in the book. How do you write something that makes someone snort tea out their nose? Is there a method or is it a gift?
Oh, that's so lovely, Kate. Thank you. I've discovered that it's partly the editor, because what I always do is I go too far. I'm the person who takes the joke too far, and the first draft is always too far. And then my editor will come in and go, that's too far, that's too far, that's too far. And then I can just cross off bits. So once she says it's too far, somehow I can see that there's bits that need to be crossed off. But if I don't go too far in that first draft, I can't get up there. Does this make sense? I can't get up there after that. Like it's easier to go too far and then cross off the bits that are too far than it is to kind of try and make it funny on the way through. So if left to my own devices, I'm the person who takes that joke like to the point of but so I just need somebody to kind of pull me back. And whenever she pulls me back, take this out, I'm like, you're taking out all the funny. And she's like, no, I'm not. So I think, I think a license to let yourself be free in that first draft is really important, because if I had to monitor myself at the same time as I was trying to make something funny, I don't think it would be very funny at all. I need to really just go to town, and it's much easier than to peel it back.
That's really interesting. This is a question from me. This is not the readers. Sorry, readers. How many drafts do you do several drafts, or do you just kind of work on one document and keep changing and molding and killing darlings? One document.
Yeah, I get one document and then I send it in, and then I get my edit, and then I do another document, and hopefully that's it.
Right. So do you write? I was so interested that your answer as a pantser was that you just start at the beginning and write through. You don't sort of pluck scenes. And
as well as pantser and planner, there's also another two categories, which are knitter and quilter. So knitters are like me. I have to start at the first line. If I can't find that first line and then move forward, like I'm knitting a scarf, like you cast on the first line, then you just go straight forward. But there are equal, like it's 50-50 people who don't know what the beginning is, but they'll go, oh, I know what this scene is over here. I've got an idea for a scene that's somewhere near the end. And then they'll write the scene separately and then stitch them all together like a patchwork quilt. So we call them quilters. So, it's about 50-50 of my experience in talking to people, knitters and quilters, but I'm definitely a knitter.
Right. I've never heard those terms before. That it's interesting. It really helps but visualize also, how it's created.
One thing why it's important to say these terms is so many people get the idea that there's one way to do it, right? And if they're not doing it right, if they don't do it this way, then it's not the right way to do it. So they're not going to do it right. When I really want to, I like to tell people this, because I want to say that however it makes sense for you to write a story, if you want to write a story, there is someone really good who does it your way.
Yeah.
You have permission to do it any way you like.
Yeah, that's such great advice. I can definitely imagine if you're trying to, if you someone who's never written a novel before and you're trying to get started and you're naturally a quilter, but you think you have to begin at the beginning, that could be quite discouraging.
Right. Yeah, of course. You think I can't get this right because I don't know what the beginning is, so I can't start. Sure, you can. You know, there's lots of people who do it that way. You can just do it however you like.
I think we've got quite a few writers / aspiring writers in the audience here tonight, because we've got a couple of questions, some quite practical questions. Right. This one is from Corinne, and she asks, what advice, she says, hi, Toni. And then she asks, what advice do you have for people who want to traditionally publish a novel? Is it hard to get an agent and a publishing contract in Melbourne?
Well, my experience is long out of date now. So I signed my first contract in 2006. So things are very different now. But you know, each state has a writers' centre. Melbourne has Writers Victoria, who do a fantastic job in keeping writers connected to the industry. When I was sending out Edition, my first book, I didn't even bother with an agent, because I thought I would have zero chance of getting an agent, because, you know, I've never been on a reality television program or dated a footballer, and no one had ever heard of me. So I thought no one would be interested. But I sent it to publishers directly. But now they have things like, you know, speed dating, where you get to pitch to people, and competitions are always great. So there are a variety of ways of getting your work in front of people. But I also, if I can just say one more thing, want to remind people that it is kind of like dating. It's much easier when you're the person being chased by publishers than when you're the person doing the chasing. So if you want to be the person who, you know, you want to be the person who publishers are sitting around a table going, why haven't we signed Corinne yet? You know, so and you get that by, you know, entering things in competitions and getting shortlisted, or building up a body of work in short fiction so that you're read in places, or, you know, finding, you know, your own voice and getting a bit of renown for that. It's much better when the shoe is on the other foot.
And Australia has so many great opportunities for people who do want to dip their toe in. There are so many literary journals, Express Media if you're younger. Is Overland still around? Sorry, Overland.
Overland is still going strong. But, you know, I do consider myself a bit of an expert at this, Jen, because I was a scientist for a lot of years before I wrote any fiction. I didn't write any fiction at all till I was in my late 30s. And now having the opportunity to go to schools and talk to year 12 students about the kind of choices they're making for what they're going to do next year, it's really overwhelming for young people to say, you know, whatever you decided when you're 16, that's it, like pick something and do it. So I always try and refocus that discussion around, what do you want to do first? What do you want to do first? Not what do you want to do forever, because just like me and like a lot of other people, as you grow, you discover new interests and your career can move in other directions. And there's a joy and a terror in learning a new skill, like me when I was nearly 40 and I started learning how to write fiction, because you're so out of your depth, but it's exhilarating and panicking and a brain expanding all at the same time. So yeah, it's never too late in my view.
Yeah. I've got some more questions from Corinne, and this time just asking about writing comedy. How do you tackle political correctness, and are you ever concerned your jokes might offend people?
I'm pretty certain that they will definitely offend people. I think anytime you put a comedy on something, you're really begging for somebody to say this isn't funny, or this isn't funny for this reason. I know that I have pure intentions, and I try and I can't say I never laugh at people, because I really do, but I try and laugh at everybody equally. I feel like political correctness is what my grandmother would have called common decency. So I kind of, if I'm acting in a way that I feel like I'm treating people with dignity and respect, even if I find them amusing, I think I'm going to be okay with that.
Yeah, great answer. We'll have one more question, and then perhaps, Toni, if you wouldn't mind reading a passage for our audience, I think that would be a great treat for everyone. But just before we get to that, Jody has asked, and another very good question, are you inspired by other authors, or is it just your need to express your imagination?
I think I read so much. I still probably read 2 books a week, 2 novels a week, and I always have. I don't have a car, and I haven't had a car for maybe 12 years because I can read so much more on public transport. Really, I'm completely obsessed with reading, and I'm obsessed to the point where I will finish every book now. When I was not a writer, if a book didn't grab me like by 50 pages, I would easily put it down. But now I want to see why it doesn't grab me, and how they bring it home, and what I think about what I would have done differently. There's a whole, even books that are not to my immediate taste, I have to think about what did someone love in this to publish it. So I'm reading even more than I did before I got published, but I think it's all about other books. Yes, I think books are in a community of themselves, apart from writers being in a community. Books are also in a community where you can see influences from other books pop up in other books.
Do you have favourite authors? Is there anyone who, no matter what they published, you would buy it immediately?
Well, Zadie Smith is top of that list. And here, Michelle de Kretser, definitely. So they would be my kind of top 2. But I also love Liane Moriarty because I love that satirical style that she brings to things. But there's just so many. And in Australia, we're absolutely blessed with, we just punch above our weight so much in terms of fiction. It's just extraordinary.
I think you're absolutely right. It's so true. You see Australian novelists just really taking over the world.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So we might pause on the questions just for now, Toni, and if I can throw to you and we can have a reading.
Okay. Put on my glasses. Here we go. Okay, so this is just Simon kind of explaining what life has been like since he lost his job in the lockdown. Now that Simon was home while the kids were getting ready for school, it would be a fantasy come true if his children would be quiet in the mornings. Wrangling children was such an enormous undertaking. He was surprised someone hadn't made $1 billion by designing an app. He went through the rigmarole every morning. First, he was woken by the sound of Tansy struggling the children to their feet as though raising the dead. Then listening while she fed and dressed them while one, OK Lockie, got distracted by a song on the radio or had an urgent need to resolve some long-standing philosophical problem, like whether flies were disgusted by other flies. Lockie would say, one fly might go to another fly, Phil, you're way too clean today. You're making me want to spew. Roll in some poo right now. That would happen, wouldn't it, Mum? And what does Tansy say to that? I'm sure Dad knows the answer, is what she says. Why does she refer Lockie to him? He's clearly trying to sleep. She knows the same amount about flies as he does, which is precisely nothing. Simon hasn't secretly been Jeff Goldblum all this time. Then there's the packing of the lunch boxes, where parental effort was inversely related to reward. Tansy spent hours painstakingly cutting vegetables into interesting kid-friendly shapes that attracted zero interest. When she had an early meeting, Simon would slap together Vegemite and cheese on white bread with a side of pretzels, and the kids were so keen they'd scoff it on the way to school. And fruit. What a waste of time and money is fruit. Parents pack fruit, apparently, so that the fruit can enjoy a leisurely few hours out of the house. Then once the kids were physically at the front door and the door was opened, the just hafters began. I just have to get my hat or my jumper or my library bag or my lightsaber. Simon once ran a business with clients and staff. He spent literal decades waking up before the alarm and heading out the door as dawn was breaking. Now he couldn't seem to force himself awake. Now the very idea of the day and what it might hold seemed more than he could handle. If he stayed in bed, which was preferable, then nothing else bad could happen. So that was how he spent his mornings before Naveen's garden was dropped on him. He was dragged to consciousness either unwittingly by his noisy children or by an extreme act of will because Tansy had left early and it was his turn to act as incompetent butler / cook / philosopher. It had, in fact, been a long time since Simon had felt competent at anything.
Thank you, Toni. I remember chuckling out loud, thinking of the fruit going on a little day trip the first time I read that passage. It feels very, very true. I'm wondering, I'll let you have a sip of your Negroni, but I'm wondering, why did you pick that passage to read?
I just think it sums up his state of mind. Like he's a good dad. He loves his kids. He's just going through a hard time, and you know, the question is, he's been asked to landscape a garden that belongs to Tansy's oldest friend, and he's got a week to do it. And this should be more than within his abilities to do it. But you know, things get in his way, and he gets in his own way, and the question is, you know, can he manage it?
We'll go back to some questions from our audience. This one comes from Kate. There are some lovely twists in this book. How do you keep track of secrets? There are things the writer knows, things the reader knows, and things that Simon knows. How do you keep it all straight in your head? That is an excellent question.
It's true. This is a thing. It's something that I really like doing. As I said before, I like it when the reader knows more than Simon. But as the family has expanded, I realize that they all have different views on things. And I've just actually finished the second book as well, which is, I want to make this a series, I've decided, Jen. So
oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've done another about the older sister, Kylie. And she knows things about the family that none of the other members of the family know as well. So I've got kind of sheets blue tacked above my desk to try and keep track of these things. But thank you, Kate. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's things the reader knows that nobody else knows. There's things that Simon knows and other people don't know, and things that other people know and Simon doesn't know. So yeah, it's all there.
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. Does the wall above your desk look like they're trying to solve a murder or something?
Just about like that.
That's really exciting. I didn't realize that you were writing another Schnabels book, let alone have finished it.
They're so hilarious. You know, they're so great to spend time with. And what I like about them is they look normal on the outside, like normal people. Yeah. But actually, in fact, there's no such thing as a normal person or an average person. Everybody has this entire landscape of interior thoughts that you can never see from the outside. And Simon, as he's holding it together, you know, he's got one kind of dark night where he doesn't sleep. He relives, you know, all his embarrassments of his past life, and you just never really know what's going on under the surface of people. And that idea of people who seem like normal people on the outside and have an entire different world going on inside them, I find that fascinating.
Yeah, that chapter was very well done. I think we all know what it's like to lie awake at night and think, oh God, what about that thing I did in grade 6? So embarrassing. Yeah. I've got another question here about strategies, and this is from Kate, and she asks, do you have any strategies for days when writing feels like a total slog?
I think sometimes I have more ambition for myself than my unconscious mind, which is doing the hard work. And I think a lot of that is ego. Like, I'm determined that I'm going to do this, but the story is going to come at its own pace, and you can't really pretend, you know, that you're driving the bus. You've got to, you know, a part of my challenge, because I used to be a scientist and I felt very kind of intellect forward and not very intuitive forward, is trying to develop, at least in the first draft, that intuitive side of me, so that there was some other intelligence other than the front of my brain kind of doing things. And that's kind of about patience, and it's about really just getting out of my own way and trusting, okay, maybe tomorrow, you know, it'll be there tomorrow. But I still sit there. There because if I get in the habit of piking out and going to the movies every time I have a bad day, like that's the end of everything.
That makes me think of another question, and sorry audience, I'm gonna steal a spot for a personal question here, a question of my own, I should say. So Dinner with the Schnabels, how long is this? Looks like maybe about 120, 130,000.
No, it's not close. No? It's probably about 86.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's quite short.
So if you counted up all the words that you put towards writing Dinner with the Schnabels, all of the things that end up on the cutting room floor, all of the jokes that your editor says, no, too far.
Yeah.
How many words do you think you write in total before trimming it all down to the final package?
I can tell you the first draft was 92. And then that came down by about 10 of stuff that had to come out. And then there was a bit more I had to add, that because there was a few gaps when we looked at it, holes that needed to be filled. Okay. So so I probably wrote another 4 or something like that, just to fill plug little holes.
That's quite efficient. You sometimes hear authors talk about, I ripped 60,000 words out of it.
Oh my God. I mean, that is so, I couldn't do that. That makes me want to cry. Even when people say that, I just want to cry. But I'm the kind of person who packages up leftover food at restaurants and takes it home for my lunch the next day. Like, I do not like to waste things. I try, and part of that is because I'm so lazy. I'm just the laziest person alive, Jen. So because I'm so lazy, I have to do things in the most efficient manner, because like the idea of writing 60,000 words, I need to toss it like, no, thank you, no.
I'm sure that's not laziness. I'm going to stick with efficiency. Libby asks, Toni, do you write every single day?
This is the first book I've written every single day. I used to work, but this is the first book I've written full time. So before this, I used to, as most writers do, I patched together kind of a bit of a career. So I did a bit of teaching and some mentoring, and I ran workshops, and I did, the writing. So I would write 3 days a week. I'd write Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and kind of patch together the week. But since 9 days, beautiful, wonderful 9 days is on the VCE list, I'm getting an income that I hadn't expected from a book that came out in 2012. So I thought, if this is my chance to try and do it full time and see how it goes. So I do write I write Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday now, and Wednesday I leave for admin and a few little bits and pieces. But this is the first time I've done it, and really it was joyous. It was really great.
I think the joy really comes through in it as well, which is a feat considering it was a lockdown book.
Thank you, Jen.
Just on that Wednesday, and perhaps you classify this as writing, but how much of research do you do? Do you have library days? And perhaps it's different for each book, but say just with Dinner with the Schnabels, for example, how much research goes into that?
But this is the beauty of contemporary, it's something that's written at the time. I really didn't have to do very much. Like, I had to do a little bit about architecture because I didn't know anything about architecture. But I was, a bit more strategic with this job. So I made Nick, the younger brother, a primary school teacher because my sister is a primary school teacher. I made Tansy work for a real estate agency because my husband used to work for a real estate agency. And I made Kylie a pharmacist because as part of my degree, I studied pharmacology, not quite the same, but I have a basic understanding of how things work. So I tried to, pick jobs that I couldn't steal people's information from. So there's really hardly anything I had to research. It's the easiest, contemporary fiction is very easy. Historical, much harder in terms of research, but this one was easy.
I imagine that's what brings that note of authenticity, though, sort of really understanding what a teacher does, what a real estate agent does.
Yeah. And I've given, in one of my books, Our Tiny Useless Hearts, I gave the main character an exact job I used to do, which was, for a while I was what's called a stock culture librarian. So it's really like a gardener for bacteria. So it was my job to stay in a little room all day, filled with these little incubated trays at different temperatures with petri dishes with different kinds of bacteria in, and I would have to, grow them and make their food and transfer them when they got the trays got too full. And so I gave, one of the characters, I try and mine my life, because it makes life so easy if I can steal things and stick them in.
It's such an interesting line of work as well. I imagine the readers love to get that insight into this education that they probably didn't know much about.
Yeah, it's you know, I miss science to a degree, so it's, you know, it's good that I keep it in a few of the books.
I'm glad that you mentioned stealing from life, actually, because I did wonder, you know, stealing jobs or sort of using your real world knowledge of jobs to build authentic characters is one thing, but so much of what makes Dinner with the Schnabels wonderful is that beautiful observational humour that you bring to it. Do you ever steal from life in terms of an incident or something someone says? Do you ever think, oh, that's just too good and I've just got to take it?
I often say that. And another one of the joys of public transport, as well as being able to read, is being able to eavesdrop on people. You have no idea the absolute candor that people speak into their phones so loudly while you're sitting next to them. It's fascinating. So I do get quite a few good lines that way. But I do really just like making up people as well. I love the idea of, you know, I'm always having pretend conversations with people who don't exist in my head. And, you know, the idea of making up people, it's just fantastic.
I think we've got time for a couple of more questions from our audience. So this is an anonymous question. Have you ever had any personal experiences that have encouraged you to write your books? For example, moving to another country, marriage, a new pet, and what would you say to your readers who are scared to write a novel?
I think a lot of those experiences have popped up in my books. Maybe not the experiences, that's not the right thing, but the feelings. The feelings that you have when something happens. I try and remember what those feelings were. And there's really nothing to be scared of, because for that whole first draft, it's just you, it's just for you. And it's almost to me like, you know, I'm obsessed with writing fiction, obviously. There's something almost meditative about it. It's a time that you are carving out of your day that belongs to you, and you're making something out of the energy of your own brain and the movement of your own fingers that belongs to no one but you, and you don't have to show it to anybody if you don't want to. And it's, if you don't write it down, it's gone, right? Because nobody can ever write the thing that you are going to write ever. So I'm really a great believer in it, and it doesn't even have to be writing. It can be any of the arts. If you want to paint something, do that. Or if you want to, you know, crochet something, do that. Or cook something. I'm really an enormous believer in the value and the power that creative acts bring to you, regardless of whether it has an audience or not. You know, there's a famous line in that writing teachers sometimes say that, you know, if you're allowed to write, even if that your writing will only make one person's life better, and it's also okay if that one person is you. And I think that's a really powerful and true thing about the power of giving yourself and modeling that for your children as well. It's all right to take time for yourself to make something special.
Absolutely. That's such a beautiful sentiment. We've got a couple more questions. Now, Jodie, you've sort of preempted one of her questions. She was asking, my next question was going to be, how do you leave the characters? And she is thrilled to have learnt that you decided not to. So that's so exciting. I feel like this is actually a Books and Bubbles scoop. This is why you need to be on Books and Bubbles. Another Schnabels is coming. And Toni, you mentioned potentially a series.
Well, you know,
you think it'll be...
I'm quite inspired by, do you remember Marion Keyes had that fantastic series of those 5 sisters, those 5 Irish sisters? I can't remember the surname, but some of them will remember the surname. Is it Walsh sisters? Someone out there will know that. Yeah, the Welshes. Thank you. Somebody's just popped up. Yeah, so I kind of thought, you know, we should have something like that in Australia, something not something kind of light-hearted and warm about a family finding their way through life and the changes that time brings to people and the connections between people, so we can follow them. So yes. I thought I'd give it a go. Well, we'll see what happens. You know, I'm not sure that it all depends, on the publisher, etc. But, I think it would be nice to follow these people for a little while and see what happens to the family.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of revisiting the family every couple of years and getting to see how they grow and change, as you say.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever read, Robin Klein did a beautiful series, and I think it was more directed at young adults. So I read it when I was quite young, but it was 4 sisters, I think, and they lived in the country. The blue all under the blue uncolored weather and dresses of red and gold. I'm not sure if any of our readers remember that.
I'm going to dig it out now. I'm going to find them.
Oh, they were just gorgeous. I loved them. But part of what I loved about it was books kept coming out and you could revisit them and revisit them. So hopefully we can revisit the Schnabels a couple more times. We've got one more question and then we might start thinking about wrapping up. Jodie asks, Toni, are you happier being an author than you were a scientist, or is it just different and something that you have consciously or subconsciously been working towards?
Thank you for that very interesting question. I'm quite nostalgic for science, but I actually think I'm pretty much nostalgic for a kind of work that almost doesn't exist now. So, my friends who are still in science, when I worked for the university and for a biotech company, we did a lot of things with our hands. We modified our own equipment and made our own reagents, and really it was a very hands-on kind of thing. And the people I know who are still in that field have said to me, we don't do that anymore. We just have a machine and we put it on a slide and put it in, the answer comes out. So I think I'm, as always, nostalgia is for a time that's gone. I think I'm kind of nostalgic for something that doesn't exist anymore. But I love writing every day. It's just, I've said this before, but it's really, I feel like I'm 8 years old playing dolls for a living, really. And it's just the best fun I could have ever imagined.
And as I say, I think that sense of fun and that sense of joy definitely comes through, particularly in this book, which is just so full of hilarious moments. One more question to wrap up, if you will indulge me, Toni. I just wanted to let everyone else know, with the Schnabels has received a lot of praise. Pip Williams, who wrote the spectacular dictionary of lost words, called it a tonic and a delight. And Leanne Moriarty said, I loved every page of this funny, warm, delightful novel. But not everybody is kind. And this is something that you and Leanne have previously discussed. And I remember this. From a few years ago, you were in conversation with Leanne at the Melbourne Writers Festival, and you were discussing receiving criticism as writers, and Leanne was describing how she received this scathing email from a Northern Hemisphere reader who had discovered a gaping and unforgivable pothole in one of her novels, and that issue was that the story occurred in March to April, but the book was set in autumn. When any fool knows, autumn occurs from September to November, the American reader pointed out. And I thought this reader was possibly Gloria Schnabel. What is the most baffling criticism you have ever received?
Well, unfortunately, that's a really great story from Leanne, because of course she was correct because she's here. And my story has not got that same sweet ending. So my first book, Edition, was about a woman obsessed with counting things and obsessed with numbers. And I'm very interested in the idea of control and how people control their lives. So that's what led me into this idea of someone interested in numbers. In fact, I'm terrible at maths, failed it twice at university, and am just hopeless. So in addition, there is a small passage where Grace, my main character, who is number obsessed, is counting up the letters. I think from memory, it's in her mother's name. And, she counts blah, 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 blah. And then she says, that's 24 and da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's actually not 24. It's like 23. Like I miscounted. Like I could not count to 24 because it really is 23. And I didn't see it. And I'm just, anyway, it's published. And I would have had emails for probably 5 years.
Oh, no.
But they're all right? These people are right. I'm wrong, right? They're very nice emails. Everyone was so lovely. They're like, just to let you know that, in fact, that string of letters adds up to like 23. And I have to write back every time, thank you so much for letting me know that, because I'm an idiot, right? So if only I had a story like Leanne's where I was right and they were wrong, but I don't. I have a story where they're right and I'm wrong.
No, and you're being haunted. And this is the problem. Edition was such a success. You were being haunted for years.
Yeah, and most of them came from Germany, those letters.
Oh, really? Were there any sort of editions published a little bit later where you were able to
I think
stop the letters?
Yeah, we did. We fixed it as we went along, but from the, in that first edition, just hopeless. Like,
oh no.
I can't imagine what I was thinking, but there you go.
Well, I mean, writing a novel, there's so much in there.
There's so much. I've got so much to think about, Jen. Yeah. I can't be expected to count to 24. Like, clearly, I should have minions for that, right?
Well, we're laughing about it now, but as a debut novelist, I can imagine that feeling, that sinking feeling when you got that first letter.
So embarrassing. You just go, great. Like, everybody knows that I can't, hopeless.
Everyone, audience, readers, everyone who's joined us with Sundays Melbourne, thank you so much for the amazing questions. I've learned a lot. I've been grateful for the wonderful questions that have come through, because it's definitely been a stimulating conversation. And Toni, thank you so much for being with us. If you've loved this conversation, please join us on Wednesday, 25th of May for our next Book and Bubbles. We'll be talking to Kelly Rimmer about her book, The German Wife, an unputdownable novel inspired by real events of a community torn apart when a former Nazi family moves into town to work on NASA's space program. You can visit booksandbubbles.com.au to register for that event. Or you might like to sign up for the Books and Bubbles newsletter so that you're the first to know about all the events that are coming up. And you can also watch previous events on demand. Thank you so much, Toni. Thank you, audience. Dinner with the Schnabels, perfect Mother's Day gift. It's been such a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing everyone at a future Books and Bubbles event down the track.
Thank you so much.
Bye.